carried. The nays are 1, 2/3 being in the... Yeah, that's where I was going. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The chair will receive a message.
Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed with an amendment, H.R. 1848, cited as the Small Airplane Revitalization Act of 2013, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of privileges of the House. May I be recognized?
The gentleman may read the resolution.
The form of the resolution is as follows. Whereas the BBC News on October 1st, 2013 in England published the following. For most of the world, a government shutdown is very bad news, the result of revolution, invasion, or disaster. Even in the middle of its ongoing civil war, the Syrian government has continued to pay its bills and its workers' wages. That leaders of one of the most powerful nations on earth willingly provoked a crisis that suspends public services and decreases economic growth is astonishing to many. Whereas the state-run Xinhua news service on October 2, 2013 in China published the following. Quote, with no political unity to redress its policy mistake, a dysfunctional Washington is now overspending the confidence of its leadership. Close quote. Whereas the News of Mexico on September 25, 2013 in Mexico published the following, quote, they squabble over the inconsequential accomplishments of a 10-week funding extension. It isn't serious, but it certainly isn't funny. Close quote. Whereas the Australian on October 1st, 2013 in Australia published the following, quote, the irresponsible way in which Congress played the politics of partisan petulance and obstruction does them little credit. Neither does it say much for the budgetary processes in the world's largest economy. Close quote. Whereas the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung on October 2, 2013 in Germany published the following, quote, the main actors in this dispute, which brings together many factors, both ideological and political, took a huge risk and unhindered proceeded to validate everyone who ever accused the political establishment in Washington of being rotten to the core. The public is left wondering how things could have been allowed to get to this point and why there is so much poison in the system. Close quote. Whereas the Süddeutsche Zeitung on October 2, 2013 in Germany published the following, quote, what has already been apparent in America for a few years is now the self-destruction of one of the world's oldest democracies. And the great tragedy here is that this work of destruction isn't being wrought by enemies of democracy, greedy lobbyists, or sinister major party donors. America's democracy is being broken by the very people who are supposed to carry and preserve it, the politicians. At the moment, Washington is fighting over the budget, and no one knows if the country will still be solvent in 3 weeks. What is clear, though, is that America is already politically bankrupt. Close quote. Whereas the Washington Post on September 30, 2013 quoted Justice Malala, a political commentator in South Africa, as saying the following, quote, they tell us you guys are not being fiscally responsible, and now we see that they're running their country a little like a banana republic. There's a lot of sniggering going on, close quote. Whereas the headline of the New York Daily News, the fourth most widely circulated daily newspaper in the United States on October 1st, 2013 read, quote, House of Turds, And the byline stated, D.C. cesspools shut down government and, quote, they get paid while nation suffers, close quote. Whereas these reports call into question the dignity of the House of Representatives, and whereas the resulting reduction in the public's perception of the House's dignity has culminated in a 7% congressional approval rating in the most recent Economist YouGov poll, now therefore be it resolved that it is the sense of the House, 1, without seeking to effect a change in the rules or standing orders of the House or their interpretation, and 2, without prescribing a special order of business for the House, that a government shutdown is a mark upon the dignity of the House, and that the House would be willing to pass a clean continuing appropriation resolution to end it.
Under Rule 9, a resolution offered from the floor by a member other than the majority leader or the minority leader as a question of privileges of the House has immediate precedence only at a time designated by the chair within 2 legislative days after the resolution is properly noticed. Pending that designation, the form of the resolution noticed by the gentleman from Florida will appear in the record at this point. The chair will not at this point, determine whether the resolution constitutes a question of privilege. That determination will be made at the time designated for consideration of the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Prepared to entertain 1-minute requests. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, when Congress was unable to reach agreement on a funding bill, the House acted immediately on the Pay Our Military Act. The bill passed the House on September 29th, the Senate on September 30th, and was signed into law by the President that same day. The Pay Our Military Act ensures that military personnel and active military reservists will be paid and receive their allowances during this government shutdown. Over the past week, the House has put forward legislation to fund critical areas of government. We passed our Pay Our Guard and Reserve Act and the Honoring Our Promise to Our America's Veterans Act. Yesterday, we considered and passed the Nutrition Assistance for Low-Income Women and Children Act, and today we passed another bill to fund the government. These measures should have received the support of every member in this chamber. They are the bills that should have passed the Senate and made their way to the President's desk. The President and the Senate should back these bills just as they did the Pay Our Military Act. Let's end this stalemate and move forward with the people's business. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker. And
without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, members, I want to wish congratulations to our Republican majority and thank you for bringing a bill to the floor that would guarantee pay for the furloughed federal employees. The essentials employees that are already working will be paid from existing law. So now we're going to pass to the Senate where those furloughed employees will come back, will be able to be paid. My question to the majority, Republicans, is now that we're going to pay these furloughed employees, let's bring them back to work. Why would we not bring them back to work if we're paying for them? This is the first time I know I've heard of people being paid not to work, but I never heard the Republican majority before that. I voted it. It passed unanimously out of the House. But let's bring those folks back to work, and let's reopen this government, put those dedicated federal employees who don't have to stand down there and stop our veterans to go to the World War II Memorial, those folks who are working on all the things that make our country great, let's bring them back to work. We can do that. We're going to pay them. Let's let them come back and do their job. And I yield back my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona stand? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is my precious privilege this morning to express a loving tribute to one Marguerite Freeman. Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Freeman was my 3rd and 4th grade teacher. And if I could be with her right now as she is surrounded with family and friends and well-wishers on her 103rd birthday, I would just look into her eyes, Mr. Speaker, and say, thank you, precious lady, for all that you've done for me in this life. Without your loving encouragement to me as a child, I may never have had the privilege to stand here in this place and speak on the floor of the United States Congress. And I was only one of hundreds of children whose hearts and minds you so deeply touched with your noble message of love and human dignity to the generations to come. So, beloved Mrs. Freeman, only eternity will discover your magnificent contribution to humanity. Happiest birthday to you, gentle lady, and may God keep you forever. That's what I would say, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
To ask consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Federal workers already under sustained attack from the Republican shutdown caucus certainly deserve to have no further abuse. But approval of this bill is surely one of the more bizarre moments in a truly bizarre Republican-controlled House. These great conservative stewards of the taxpayers' dollars refuse to let our federal workers work. And now today they approve legislation to pay them for not working. Getting nothing for your tax dollar. That's the new Republican Tea Party concept of fiscal responsibility. And of course the federal workers, even though they have paid leave now, are justifiably unhappy because of the uncertainty of not knowing from day to day whether they will be called to work and not knowing whether that paid leave will arrive in time to meet their bills at the end of the month. Paying federal workers not to work, a new level, truly, of absurdity in this politically manufactured government shutdown. I yield back.
And time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just as Mr. Doggett has said, the absurdity, I'm not sure if this is Joseph Heller or if it's Fellini. The Tea Party Republicans came here because they were concerned about the debt. The debt, Mr. Speaker, was caused by Reagan and Bush. Look at the records. Reagan and Bush caused the debt.
Sure.
Now they've shut down their government like an arsonist sets a fire, and they're coming around acting like they're firefighters trying to rescue the children who they didn't realize were in the building who couldn't get help from the NIH for their cancer treatment, and the veterans they're going to rescue who couldn't go to the memorials, and the federal workers who aren't getting paid. It is like a Fellini movie. There's apparently a wall between the Tea Party Republicans and the mainstream Republicans who would like to move this country forward. Mr. Speaker, tear down that wall.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition? Texas, excuse me.
Yeah, I'll take Texas. I ask unanimous consent to rise, address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
And Mr. Speaker, what is going on in the House of Representatives right now actually is about the debt. And, you know, you can look back 17 years when Speaker Gingrich was Speaker of this House. What was gained by the Republican majority during that time? If you just look at it from purely political lens, actually the Republican majority was reelected for the first time in 68 years after that last government slowdown, the last time being 1928. This House passed welfare reform, and passed welfare reform, and passed welfare reform until President Clinton signed the bill. The largest capital gains tax reduction in the history of this country was passed after the last government slowdown, and the first overall reduction in taxes in 17 years occurred after the last government slowdown. 4 consecutive balanced budgets came out of that activity. Probably the only balanced budgets in my lifetime occurred after Speaker Gingrich had the courage to do what he did 17 years ago. And, Mr. Speaker, perhaps most telling, in the State of the Union address that followed the government slowdown last time, President Clinton stood in this House and announced the era of big government is over. Those are words we can aspire to. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welcome to the alternative universe in the House of Representatives. We just voted, as we knew we would, to pay the furloughed workers when the shutdown ends, as we knew we would. What started as a right-wing tantrum to defund Obamacare, which failed, as it inevitably would, and then it became a demand to pull the rug out for another delay, we're now arguing about something. Negotiations? What? Since we've decided to pay everybody anyway, let's vote on the continuing resolution so we can at least get work in exchange for paying our employees and stop losing tens of millions of dollars every hour. The Republicans now want to negotiate. I think that's terrific. We have been waiting for 6 months for the House Republicans to appoint their conference committee so we can reconcile differences on the budget. Let's vote on the continuing resolution. Let's appoint conference committees and get back to work.
Gentleman's time expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're seeing an interesting dialogue today in the 1 minute. Last week, House Republicans brought to the floor a bill before the shutdown to pay our military. Both sides totally supported that. The Senate accepted it, and the President signed the bill. So that's law. Early this week, after the shutdown occurred, House Republicans brought to the floor to fund the Veterans Administration, to fund National Cancer Institute research, to fund and open our national parks. My friends on the other side of the aisle, most of them, not all, but most of them voted no against that and called it a gimmick. Today we brought a bill to the floor, the House Republicans, once the shutdown is over, to pay furloughed workers. Again, on that one today, both sides embraced it and said it's a good thing. And now my friends on the Democratic side are getting up and arguing against themselves. We want to open the government. We want to end this, but we want to keep as much of the government functioning while we do it.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Through the looking glass, curiouser and curiouser, said Alice. I'm confused. It started out as we're going to shut down the government until we repeal Obamacare. Then it was, okay, we'll shut down the government until we delay Obamacare or the individual mandate or repeal the device tax or something. Now I just heard a gentleman from Texas say, we're shutting down the government because we're concerned about the deficit. What is it? Which is it? Now, come on. You're concerned about the deficit. Then we have a process. It's called the annual budget process and appropriations. It's a law. We should follow the law, which means temporarily continue the government. We don't shut down the government to, deal with our differences in how much money we want to spend each year for what agencies. This is getting absurd. We're now going to pay federal employees to not work. Let's just declare them all essential, make them come back to work, and then we'll pay them later. Maybe in the Republican world that makes sense. No, let's just end the shutdown, bring them all back to work, give them their regular pay now, let them have their leave, and move forward with negotiations over the budget.
Are there any further 1 minute requests? Start here. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just one minor point. We say Oregon. And since the Ducks are going to win the national championship this year, we want to make sure everybody knows how to say it properly. Thank you. I rise today to discuss something that happened earlier in the week. Now, the Republicans are playing whack-a-mole. Every time something pops up in the national press that is really embarrassing about this shutdown, they hit it with
a phony resolution that they're going to fix the problem that they know is going nowhere in the Senate and not going to the President. So earlier this week, after the extraordinary embarrassment of the veterans at the World War II Memorial, I was just down there for an honor flight this morning. They still don't have bathrooms, by the way. Now, they decided, well, that, and then they were hearing from a lot of small business people outside of Yosemite and other parks saying, you know, open the parks. Okay, so they took one little tiny slice of the Department of Interior budget and they funded it. That which is most iconic, that which is most visible in the press. But guess what? They forgot everything else that goes on within the Department of Interior. Now, I'll start locally and we'll build back to the national issue here. The William L. Finley National Wildlife Refuge in the Willamette Valley opened the very popular firearms hunting season for black-tailed deer late last month in September, but this week they're having to turn away hunters because of the House government shutdown. The Bandon Marsh National Wildlife Refuge, also in my district, great spot for waterfowl hunting. Right now, the only thing it's open to are swarms of mosquitoes. My colleague from California will talk in some detail about the Klamath Refuge, closed. The beginning of hunting season, closed. The Fish and Wildlife Service in Oregon recently proposed that 3 other Oregon refuges, Basket Slough, Nestucca Bay, and Siletz Bay, be open to hunting. Guess what? They can't continue the process to open those areas to hunting because of the government shutdown. According to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, nearly 300,000 hunters spend more than $135 million a year by shutting down the federal government and restricting hunting access on public lands. House Republicans have turned their backs on sportsmen and small businesses, not just in Oregon, but across the country. In addition to hunting, the refuges provide anglers for fishing, hikers, kayakers, birdwatchers, and other outdoor enthusiasts, all who spend money in the local communities around these refuges. They're not coming. They're not spending the money in the local businesses, all because of the phony shutdown of the government. Well, it's a real shutdown, but the stupid shutdown of the government by our Republican majority. National Wildlife Refuges generate $1.7 billion in sales for nearby communities, and many of them are totally dependent, or much dependent upon that for their survival. And every day, small businesses across the country that relate to hunting and fishing and other outdoor recreational activities, $4.5 million a day in lost sales to their small businesses. You know, this has got to end. There are other very serious issues which a number of my other colleagues will talk about here this morning as relates to commercial fishing, commercial crabbing, and a number of other critical activities that are fulfilled by the federal government under the Department of Interior, which were not restored or phonily restored by the Republicans. With that, I'd be happy to yield to my colleague from California, Mike Thompson, such time as he may consume.
Well, I thank the gentleman, my friend, for yielding and also for bringing this issue to the attention of the American people. And, by the way, for the great work you do as our ranking member on the Natural Resources Committee. I think Mr. DeFazio made a great explanation, a very instructive explanation about this whack-a-mole game that we're playing. The Vets Memorial is closed, so we do a bill to open that up, a bill that we know isn't going anywhere. There's an issue comes about because of the lack of cancer treatment that some of our constituents need and must have, so we do a quick bill, a whack-a-mole, a quick Band-Aid. The Capitol Police demonstrate that they put their life on the line every day, and it became very, very apparent this week when we had the very unfortunate situation over in the Senate. So what do? We come out now and we say we're going to pass a bill to pay for federal employees after this fabricated government close down is done. Those are all very, very serious issues, and there are a lot of other serious issues in front of us. And that may pale in, what may pale in comparison is the issue of the wildlife refuges. And people may say, well, you know, that it's just a sport, it's recreation, but to some that's very, very important. And just a week ago, ironically, our nation celebrated the National Hunting and Fishing Day. But today, sportsmen and women who are supposed to be out enjoying the opening day of duck season in many parts of my home state of California, but they're not because of this reckless, manufactured government shutdown that has shut down hunting opportunities throughout the entire National Wildlife Refuge system. This shutdown is having a devastating impact on local economies that depend upon hunters and anglers throughout our entire country. There are 240 congressional districts that are home to national wildlife refuges. That's all the way across the country. This is an issue today and will be until we do away with this shutdown and open the government back up. Every state has at least one refuge which allows hunting. So today, hunters are supposed to be lined up at places like the Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge, the Lower Klamath National Wildlife Refuge, and the Kern National Wildlife Refuge in my state of California. But because of this shutdown, all have been canceled. Some duck hunters will be able to pursue their opening day on non-refuge land, but without hunting pressure on the refuges, their hunting is going to be shut down, closed, or at least truncated to some extent. In addition, and this is a very important issue that I think everyone needs to pay attention to, most of the access for California's disabled waterfowl hunters is found on our state's National Wildlife Refuge system. With the refuge closed, that means that disabled hunters, including many, many wounded warriors, will simply have no option for waterfowling. And in 2 weeks, all of the waterfowl hunting areas in California will be open. So if we don't end this shutdown, millions of sportsmen and women will continue to be shut out from their refuges. And it's not just the hunters and the anglers that are affected by the closure of these wildlife refuges. Hunting in California is big business. In 2012 alone, hunters and anglers generated more than $1 billion in retail sales. And they created and they sustained at least 20,000 jobs in California alone. I've heard from folks who own businesses around these refuges, restaurants, gas stations, a family-owned hotel and motel that rely on the business generated by hunters. Some local lodges and motels have seen every one of their reservations for this weekend and the following week to be canceled. They were supposed to be fully booked. Next week is supposed to be their busiest week of the year. And now, because of this fabricated shutdown, they'll have empty beds. At Curb's Outlet, a sporting goods store in Tule Lake, Don Curb, the owner, told me that he was expecting to have a big season for sales this year. Instead, he anticipates losing about $6,000 every day that the refuges are closed, and he may have to take out a loan just to keep his small business open. Hunting guides in the Klamath Basin region are losing $800 to $1,000 every day that the refuge remains closed. And just over the Oregon border, the Wild Goose Motel in Merrill could have booked up all of their hotel rooms several times over because the demand is so high for this week and this weekend and next week. But according to Fran Lynn, their manager, out of their 13 rooms and 2 cabins, they have 1 room that will be occupied. These businesses that rely on the next few weeks of hunting season to keep them in business for the rest of the year are in a hurt, and they can't make up for the loss. This first week is their big week each year, and it will be lost forever. California hunters want and need access to our national refuges. It's time for the House majority to put the interest of our nation ahead of the interest of the Tea Party and end this needless and reckless government shutdown, which is having an impact on millions of sportsmen and women around our country, along with federal employees who are being furloughed, folks waiting on veterans benefits, the folks waiting for cancer research and treatment, and the closure of our national parks. This manufactured shutdown is costing us $12 million an hour. Please bring back the clean CR to the floor for a vote so we can open our government. As all it takes is one vote, put it on the floor, and Democrats and Republicans will provide a strong bipartisan vote to pass it, to open our government, to get people back to work. And I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. My colleague Mike Thompson is the two-time chairman of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, and he was recently inducted into the California Waterfowlers Hall of Fame. So he obviously speaks with great authority on these issues and the impact of this unnecessary shutdown on hunters and related businesses in Northern California and Southern Oregon. With that, I would yield time, such time as you may consume, to my colleague from Washington State, Ms. Del Bene.
Thank you. Many of my colleagues today have been highlighting the impacts of the shutdown on sportsmen and women who are unable to access our national wildlife refuges for other public lands. As they've made clear today, this is a serious problem that's costing our country millions of dollars and is denying access to those who would otherwise be enjoying the great outdoors. In my home state of Washington, there are 11 wildlife refuges where the public can hunt or fish. All of those refuges are closed because of the shutdown. But it's not only recreational users that are being impacted. Commercial fishermen in my state will be seriously hurt in the coming weeks if this shutdown does not end. Right now, fishermen from Washington State are in Dutch Harbor, Alaska, getting ready for the Alaska king crab season that's supposed to start in less than a couple weeks. These are the same fishermen and boats that you see on the reality show The Deadliest Catch. But because of the shutdown, they may not get to start fishing this season. That's because the staff at the National Marine Fisheries Service have largely been furloughed. As a result, no one is available to issue the rules and individual quotas for boats and processors that will permit our commercial fishers to work. The Bering Sea crab fishery is worth hundreds of millions of dollars to fishermen from Alaska and Washington, and now, because of inaction in Congress, the fishing fleet, the captains, their crews, the processors stand to lose millions. So instead of a fiscal cliff, right now we're facing a fishing cliff in the Bering Sea unless Congress acts before the season is scheduled to start on October 15th. If the season doesn't start on time, the cost to industry is significant. A delay could mean they'll miss out exporting to the all-important Asian holiday market when demand is at its highest and most lucrative. Missing the Asian market when in its peak demand means prices significantly decrease by as much as 20 to 30%, which means millions of dollars in lost value. This would be a crippling loss to these businesses. And in addition to the potential loss of millions of dollars caused by market disruptions, the effects of the shutdown will be felt in other ways. Fishing boats typically incur costs of roughly $1,000 per day while sitting tied to the docks. Things like moorage fees, fuel, and food to feed the crew all cost the boat owners money. A delayed crab season means processors will have empty facilities and an idle labor force that still has to be housed and fed. So processors will be contending with costs for housing, fuel, electricity, food for laborers, and more while not bringing any desperately needed revenue. Every day this shutdown continues, we're hurting the fishing industry. Without knowing when the season will start, these businesses have no certainty or visibility to plan. If we delay the start of the crabbing season by even a few days, we risk costing the entire industry millions of dollars in lost market value. This is unacceptable. Our fishermen deserve better than this. Their families deserve better than this. The processors, suppliers, and other businesses that rely on a vibrant Alaskan king crab season all deserve better than this. It's clear that this shutdown is hurting people, businesses, and our economy. It's time to end it and get to work on passing a long-term budget that will grow our economy, reduce our deficit, and responsibly create jobs. I urge all of my colleagues to work together and do the job the American people sent us here to do. We must end the brinksmanship and do the responsible thing and reopen the government. Thank you.
The gentlelady yields back. I want to thank her for her statements and her concern for the Washington crab fleet and others who've been impacted by this manufactured crisis. I find it particularly bizarre now that this all started with a radical Tea Party minority on the Republican side, and I wonder what their supporters and constituents who seem to hate all things government are thinking about the fact that we are now paying federal employees to stay home and not provide critical services like opening of the crabbing season in the state of Alaska. I would also note that the West Coast ground fish trawl surveys have been suspended. The ships, the 5 ships who are out there doing the survey were called back to port. All of the NOAA employees were sent home, but they will be paid later, sometime. But they aren't doing the critical work we need for those commercial fisheries. With that, I would yield to my colleague from the state of California, Mr. Garamendi, such time as he may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. DeFazio, thank you so very much, and thank you for pointing out the foolishness, the nonsense, and even the hypocrisy of what's going on here. My colleague, Mike Thompson, with whom I share a good portion of Northern California, very eloquently pointed out a real problem. Now, when the duck hunters can't hunt, we got a problem. Opening day, how many days to opening day? 0. It's supposed to open today. Mr. Thompson pointed out that the refuges are closed up in the northern part of the state of California. How about elk hunters? Elk hunters out there? Opening day? Today. The refuges are closed, and a good portion of the federal forests also are unavailable. Let's see. Pronghorn hunting in Northern California and Southern Oregon supposed to start today. Not on the refuges. They're closed. Oh, if you're a fisherman and you want to fish in the refuges, don't go today. They're closed. And of course, the hunters. I think I'll just leave this one up here, because these are folks that really get agitated. And they have every reason to be agitated. This is nonsense. I really wanted to take a few moments to explain to the American public what is actually happening here. We came up on this shutdown presumably because we couldn't agree to a budget. House of Representatives passed a budget in March. The Senate passed one in late March, early April. The Senate asked for a conference committee. They appointed conferees, and Speaker Boehner, to this moment, or excuse me, until 2 days ago, refused to appoint conferees. It was only after the government shut down that he relented and appointed conferees after the blow-up. And so you want to go to conference? Why didn't you go to conference in April, May, June, July, August, even early September? Why, Mr. Speaker, didn't you appoint conferees when we had the time to negotiate? Why did you wait until after hunters couldn't go to the refuges? I don't understand. Oh, but you have a solution. The Speaker has a solution. We will open up individual parts of the government based upon what Mr. DeFazio calls the whack-a-mole theory of government. When something really embarrassing happens, we'll find a solution, says the Speaker. Wow, how brilliant. And so what did we do? Oh, we'll open some of the national monuments, not all of them. We're not going to open the Fish and Wildlife Refuges so that the hunters can hunt, but we'll open the World War II Memorial. And maybe we'll open up some of the Smithsonian facilities here in Washington. Oh, but there's a problem. That's got to go through the Senate. And that's got to have the presidential signature. And that's not going to happen. So what's going on here? What's happening? The American public says, what are you guys doing? Well, we're not doing our job. Mr. Speaker, you're not letting us do our job. We actually have a solution. It's called a continuing resolution, a CR. And that's not a medical procedure. A continuing resolution is actually a process been used over 110 times since the first day of President Clinton's, yeah, I said that, President Clinton back in 1993. 110 times we've used continuing resolutions to get past these unnegotiable periods. But this time they added a little deal to it. There'll be a continuing resolution when you repeal the Affordable Health Care Act, when you delay it, when you repeal part of it, when you change it. That hadn't been done in the past, but here we are. So where are we now with the whack-a-mole theory? You know what these are? Does the American public know what these are? These are 11 of the appropriation bills, each one very lengthy, more than 500 to 1,000 different items in each one of the appropriation bills, funding individual parts of government, one item at a time. It's a big government. It's a multi-trillion-dollar government. And it does a lot of good things like refuges, so that people can go hunting, so that people can fish, so that there are national parks, camping grounds. The national forests all across this nation, camping grounds, shut down. Nobody's camping there this weekend. These are the appropriation bills. Probably 5,000 or more individual items. And what has got to be one of the most foolish, nonsensical, and stupid actions, we're going to fund the government one item at a time. Yeah, hello, America. This is the Republican solution to the shutdown. We're going to fund the American government one item at a time. Let's see, this is day 4 of the shutdown. Okay, and to date we have funded 4 specific parts of the American government. Oh, excuse me, I'm wrong. The House of Representatives has voted to fund 4 of the thousands of different parts of the American government. 4 of them. Let me see, at this rate it'll probably be 2020 before the American government is up and operating. How stupid is that? When we have a solution available to us, Mr. Speaker, listen, we have a solution available to us. It's called a continuing resolution. It's passed the Senate. It doesn't have all of the things you may want, like terminating the Affordable Health Care Act, which is in effect, modifying it, defunding it, and God knows what else you may want. It's just what is known as a clean, continuing resolution that funds all of government. Not one item at a time, but all of government. And at what level? At the same level that it has been funded for the last 12 months. Not more funding, not less funding, but a whole lot less funding than I think is necessary. But nonetheless, it continues the funding of government at the same level as the last 12 months for the next month and a half. And then we go through all this again with another manufactured crisis. I wonder what the hunters are thinking of us. Mr. Speaker, these men and women want to go hunting. These men and women want to go fishing, camping. They want to go to the national parks. They want to recreate. They want America operating. Mr. Speaker, please. Please end this foolishness. Ronald Reagan went to Berlin, and he said, Mr. Gorbachev, take down this wall. Mr. Speaker, open up this government. Open up this government. You have the power. All you need to do is to bring to the floor the continuing resolution to fund the government at the very same level that it's been funded for the last 12 months, continue on for another 6 weeks so that we can establish what apparently you want, a conference committee, and negotiate, as we should do all the time, negotiate a resolution to this manufactured, unnecessary, stupid, dysfunctional crisis. Mr. Speaker, open up this government. I yield back my time.
Thank the gentleman. And what he pointed out is critical. There is a time sensitivity to this, and my other colleague from California pointed that out too. Many small businesses are dependent upon these critical weeks of opening season for their it's essentially like Christmas for retailers. The opening of hunting season for waterfowl and other species is for people who provide lodging and other services, guiding in those areas. And you are keeping them from working, and you're depriving them of their livelihoods. You know, in Nevada, duck season opens October 12th, swan October 12th, deer October 10th, elk October 10th. That's Nevada. That date's pretty soon. And Arizona, turkey, October 4th. Well, we're there. Bighorn sheep, October 4th. On any any of these wildlife refuges, that will not be allowed. But the bizarre thing is some Republicans are saying this is about the deficit. So they're going to pay federal employees to not work to make a point about the deficit. They're going to cause businesses to lose money on which they won't pay taxes because it's about the deficit. Or, well, then there's others of them who say it's about Obamacare. I wish the Republican majority could make up their mind, but one thing's plain and clear. I've been here 27 years. I believe in 27 years. I may be off by one. I believe 2 times out of 27 years, under both Republicans and Democrats, have we gotten all of the appropriations bills passed by the beginning of the fiscal year on October 1st. 2 times in 27 years. But we didn't shut down the government every time that happened. We adopted a very simple continuing resolution. Let's say, let's continue to fund government, not send people home and pay them. Let's continue to fund government and have them work, same cost. And, we'll do it for 4 weeks, 6 weeks to force people to the bargaining table. Sometimes at last year's levels, sometimes slightly enhanced, other times actually a little bit reduced. We're willing to do that. We've offered to do that. We have brought that up numerous times here. We're not allowed to bring it up explicitly, but on votes on rules. And the Republicans won't allow a simple majority vote on temporary funding of government. They allowed a vote today, which was unanimous, to pay people not to work, but they won't allow a vote on paying people to work over a short period of time. With that, I would yield such time as he may consume to my colleague from California, Mr. Thompson.
Thank my friend for yielding. One of the previous speakers asked a rhetorical question, how stupid is all this? And I'd like to kind of quantify that, because you can actually put numbers on it. In my home state of California, I'll tell you how stupid it is. Hunters who aren't going to be able to hunt this week, they're responsible for about $400,000 in revenue. Retail sales from hunting is $1 billion. Salaries and wages $760 million. Jobs, 21,000 of them. State and local taxes, about $155 million. Federal taxes, about $175 million. That's how stupid this is. And if you want more proof, look at the impact on the private sector. For those of you who don't like the government, for those of you who believe that we need to close down the government, because everything can be done and should be done by the private sector, you're killing private sector businesses right now. We talked about the impact on folks who are going to have to take out a loan to keep their sporting good store open during the busiest time of the year. We talked about folks who have motels and lodges who can't rent a room at a time that would otherwise be their most productive time in their business cycle. Those are private sector business owners, and they employ private sector employees who are going to be sent home. Unlike the bill that you just brought to the floor that was passed, those private sector employees who are sent home will not be sent home with full pay and benefit. They get paid when they work. The idea, and Mr. DeFazio mentioned it a couple of times, that we furlough federal workers and then pay them for not doing a job, while at the same time we're closing down the facilities that they're employed to keep open and to manage, it's baffling to me. And look at the store owners, look at the private sector businesses who are being hammered by this manufactured closure of the federal government. Gas station owners, all the people that we've talked about, if they're bird watchers, if they're fishers, if they're hunters, they're driving to these refuges, they put gas in their gas tank. Those gas sales are gone. They buy groceries. They buy groceries to eat in the cabins that they would otherwise rent, in the campsites that they would otherwise habitate. Those sales are gone. Sporting goods. They buy all the stuff that they use to hunt, fish, or bird watch. Not only are those sales gone, but for all of us who depend upon the money that's raised by the Dingell-Johnson provision, the money that the assessment that sportsmen and women put on their own purchases that go into funding all the wildlife refuges and all the places that are near and dear to sportsmen and women, that money goes away. All of the motels that would otherwise be full, that money goes away. The sales tax goes away. And these are, in most parts, rural businesses that run in rural areas. So that's different than the city and the businesses in the city. They don't have other folks coming in and spending in their area. This is, as the ranking member stated, their Christmas holiday. This is when folks come to their area to spend their money, to recreate, to hunt, and to fish. They depend upon this. So we've created a system. It's set up, manufactured, fabricated. It doesn't have to be this way. To penalize these folks who do nothing but work hard and provide opportunities for folks to recreate. In addition to that, you heard the impact that it's having on the fisheries, the commercial fisheries and the sports fisheries. It's just absolutely outrageous that we're allowing this to happen when with one vote of the compromise bill from the Senate, and I say compromise because not only is it a clean CR that we've been hearing about, remember the compromise was to bring that down to the lower funding level, a funding level that a lot of folks on our side of the aisle have a real hard time with. And that's dropped down to that rate. It can be put on the floor, voted out. These businesses will be able to do business. These employees will be able to come back to work, both the federal employees as well as the state employees. And let me not remind you of the wounded warriors who aren't going to be able to recreate this weekend and this week because of this manufactured close down of the federal government. Let's bring people back to work. Let's get going on this. I yield back to the ranking member.
Just yield my time.
Would the gentleman from Oregon yield?
Probably depends upon the topic.
We're talking about locking hunters and fishers out of wildlife refuges, the impact on small communities across America, the fact that, you know, essentially the Christmas season for many of these lodges, many of these local businesses has been shut down, sort of like the Grinch who stole Christmas. And I'm not sure what the gentleman wishes to address. I'll yield very briefly, but if we're going to go off topic or get on to something else, then I'll have to reclaim. But I've known the gentleman for years, so I'd be happy to yield some time.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Oregon, and I'm not going to be demagogic. I certainly respect the comments by the gentleman from Oregon and the gentleman from California. I was actually going to pay the gentleman from California a compliment.
Oh, well, go. Yeah,
But I just wanted the country to know that these are serious issues and there are differences of opinion based on philosophy, but there are not personality conflicts. And the gentleman from California was gracious enough several weeks ago to invite me into his home for a meal. He makes a delicious grilled chicken, and it is quite the chef. And I just wanted to thank him. And at the appropriate time, after the gentleman from California and the gentleman from Oregon have made their points, if they'd like to enter into a little bit of just an honest policy debate, I'd be happy to do that. But I know it's the gentleman from Oregon's time, and I don't want to take away from that.
Okay. Well, I thank my colleague, and I thank him for those very tempered remarks and the kind remarks about the gentleman from California. I'd like to talk about a couple other impacts. Some are in the Interior budget, some are in another budget we haven't touched yet, because Mike was talking very eloquently about the impact. These impacts are falling most on rural residents and on rural small businesses, areas that are, for the most part, still pretty darn depressed in this country. A lot of my rural areas are still seeing, they're well into double-digit unemployment. And I was talking to the Chief of the Forest Service, granted a different budget, one that hasn't gotten on the Republican radar screen yet, although I was talking to a Republican leader this morning who said they may yet do whack-a-mole on this one to try and fix it. And that is that the Chief of the Forest Service has an obligation when timber is sold to a private party to have Forest Service employees monitor those sales. He has not found a way to declare those employees as essential. And as of Monday, is going to end somewhere between 400 and 500 active timber sales, bumping up against the winter season where many people won't be able to operate depending on where the sale is, and you know, incurring obviously penalties on the federal government because he does not have the staff to go out and monitor those sales. I don't yet know about the Bureau of Land Management timber sales. They are a fairly unique thing. They happen on the statutorily unique lands of the Oregon and California lands in Oregon. We've been in touch with the BLM. We don't yet have an answer about how they're going to handle it. Much of the restoration work from recent fires cannot be considered emergency. Some of it can. Most of it can't. And that work is not ongoing. Certainly any responsible timber salvage that might happen is not even being considered, and we're losing critical time there where those activities might be conducted. And this morning, you know, we did get you know, the World War II memorial reopened only for honor flights, World War II veterans, I believe, and maybe other veterans. I'm not sure exactly of the categories that were established. There were 2 Rangers there this morning. And you know, I encountered a problem. I was there to greet a large contingent from Oregon, wonderful people who put their lives on the line. You know, but you know, we're looking at a group here who are fairly elderly, and the adjacent bathrooms are not open. I went and asked the Rangers if they could give me the key, and they said, "We don't have the key. That's maintenance." So we placed a call to the Park Service looking for the, you know, whoever is the highest ranking person not being paid to stay home. And I got a fellow who's in charge of at least the World War II memorial and some other grounds. And he said, I am prohibited from doing that. I don't have that authority. You know, I've now called the White House to ask them. I mean, come on.
restrooms for very elderly men and women who put their lives on the line, saved the country from the horrors of World War II. And we can't open the bathroom facilities. Heck, I'll go down and volunteer to refill the toilet paper rolls and clean up at night, you know, if we do that. I think other people I know would do that. So, you know, we've just got to end this. And I mean, it just became so bizarre today that Congress voted unanimously to pay a majority of the federal workforce to stay home and not provide public services. To make what point? Let's just go ahead with a continuing resolution that doesn't change anything. We can adopt the lower levels of spending that the Republicans have advocated for. Why can't we do that for 4 or 6 weeks? Open up the refuges so the business can flow again to those areas, because these hunting seasons are ephemeral, as is you know, as are these timber sales, as are other things. And I'd like to, there's another impact. The Student Conservation Association of the Interior Department has been shut down. So again, hundreds of interns sent home who were providing public services. And then also in the other budget, agriculture, the Job Corps has been shut down. Thousands of young, at-risk people have been sent home. I don't know how many of my colleagues have ever gone to a Job Corps. It is the most inspiring thing, and these kids are learning skills. These are high at risk. Many have been in trouble. Kids, young people, young adults. They're getting skills and they're getting jobs. They want to be there. They're working hard. They have been sent home. Some of them don't have a home to go to. With that, I yield to my colleague from California.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank my friend from Texas for the compliment. And you're always welcome in my home. And I would suggest that if